Hi, Diane. Thanks so much for joining us. We're in the second season now of our podcast series, Neurodivergent Nook. I'm Helen and I'm a therapist. I'm autistic ADHD as well, and I work with that population as well as others around depression and anxiety. And just to introduce yourself.
Hey everybody. Hi, yes, I'm Diane and I am also ADHD and autism. I am a previous head teacher and I'm currently a foster carer and coach and tutor for neurodivergent children and young people.
So lived experience and professional perspectives, here we come.
Yeah.
So what we're going to be chatting about today is really is all about guilt and shame. And I think it might help just to introduce it a little bit first. The concept of guilt is very much this idea that we've done something wrong. There are many, many reasons that we might feel like that. And shame is a little bit different. It's more around that concept of I am wrong and I feel ashamed of who I am rather than I feel guilt for what I might have done.
Yeah, sure.
And how do those things show up in your life as a neurodivergent individual, Diane?
Yeah, I think that for me, it kind of resonates the most in my role as a head teacher, actually. Um, obviously the leadership role, you are mainly the person kind of delegating tasks and responsibilities to your team, for example. But whenever there were pressures and deadlines that I had from the local authority, I would spend a lot of time either, procrastinating and putting off that task because I wanted to prioritize things in my school for the children. And, kind of the paperwork and the documents and the forms that I suppose, you see as the boring side of the job were the things that I would put off or sometimes miss deadlines for. And then, then obviously, the local authority would be chasing up, to get those documents in and submitted. And that kind of, then that guilt that you're not doing your job good enough, that you're not fulfilling your role, that you're worried, within the local authority that people are seeing you as kind of a failure and not being the good head teacher that you want to be. So that was something I used to find really, really hard. Although I hope and I think that I was doing, a really good job within my school. And then there's kind of the little day-to-day things that I constantly feel guilty about. So my daughter's just rang me up. She stayed at a friend's last night and she rang me up to ask her to be picked up. And I said, I can't, I'm working today. I said, why don't you get the buses? Oh, so then I spent the next hour trying to work out how on earth I could pick her up, even though she's fine to get the bus, because I feel so guilty that I've let her down. Although she's, absolutely capable of getting a bus. So those kind of little things are constant for me every single day, that I don't want to let people down, even though, I'm not. And then there's that bit, isn't it? There's kind of that historical long-term guilt that you've had since childhood for, being messy, being disorganized, not getting your homework in on time, even though you've got good intentions to and you want to. There's negative comments that come with that as well from other people. And I do it myself as a parent. I moan at my children's bedrooms being messy. And then, then I kind of sometimes backtrack and then think, like, how can I do that? How can I be a better foster carer and a better mum doing that? Or, why don't you try tidying just your desk tonight? I'm going to work on the floor tomorrow, or whatever it might be. So trying to break that down for those children so that I'm not then putting that guilt on them. So yeah, it's quite complicated in my brain how I feel that in different ways.
Yeah. And it sounds very much like this idea of perfectionism. It's like, and that can have a real impact on how we feel that guilt. You talked about the situation with your daughter. And I think sometimes that idea that we need to be getting it 100% right, 100% of the time, which actually how realistic is that really?
Yeah.
It's not, is it?
Nobody else is doing that. Neurotypical
No.
people aren't.
No one is doing that at all. That's actually, it's really, really hard as a neurodivergent person to actually, first of all, spot that that's what you're doing.
Yes.
Because, you know, you completely understandably want to be the best mum or
Yeah,
the best
of course.
teacher or the best at what you can do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's that sort of, hopefully maybe that little voice eventually that thinks, well, actually, am I being realistic
Yeah.
about that? And if I'm not being realistic, let's not beat myself up about the fact that I really had that thought in the first place.
Yeah.
But maybe let's be a little bit kinder to myself, that maybe on this occasion, my daughter does need to take the bus, or it's okay to miss that deadline.
Yeah.
And that's a really hard.
It is hard, isn't it? I mean, I quite often need other people around me to be that voice of reason and to say, you know, stop being so hard on yourself. You don't need to feel guilty about that. They are capable of doing X, Y, and Z without you. I'm not so good at being that voice of reason myself, you know. When I took on the school that I was last head at, it had an outstanding Ofsted inspection grade. And they're pretty, you know, tough to come by. So I'd already put myself in a situation where I felt pressure to do that as soon as the next Ofsted, you know, inspection was due in my school. And, you know, I'm really proud to say that while I was there, we did get 2 outstandings. But that ridiculous, you know, kind of pressure of, if I don't do that, I'm going to feel so guilty. I'm going to let the school down. I'm going to let the governors down. I'm going to let the previous head down. And that was even before the inspection, you know, was due or we knew about it. That was every day that I put that on myself. That potential guilt that I might feel if I don't do something, I don't do it really, really well. So I have the guilt, but I also have that potential guilt that happens in my life as well if I don't do something to the best of my abilities and beyond that.
Yeah. You need, and I'm sure you feel uncomfortable because that's how I often feel when people compliment me. Don't compliment me. The fear of failure around something like that can be all consuming.
Yes.
It's like that. As I want to put failure in inverted commas because, you know, there are many, many cogs in the wheels of Ofsted's reports.
Absolutely.
In schools. But it feels like sometimes we take all of the responsibilities as neurodivergent people, and sometimes it's just people. You know, you might not even need to put the word neurodivergent in front of it. It's all down to me. And taking that as, you know, if it doesn't work, then it's my fault.
Completely.
And I do wonder sometimes if we find it really difficult, and this is relevant to neurodivergent individuals, to understand sort of maybe the typical way of communicating, the social norms in inverted commas. And sometimes we've unknowingly done things that perhaps we then feel guilty about and then feel shame about. And I found myself feeling guilty about stuff that I know that I haven't done, but because I sometimes don't really understand the things that are going on around me, my automatic reaction is, oh, I feel guilty about that.
What have I done?
What have I done wrong? Because there are times that I do misunderstand things. And therefore I've kind of almost got that default position. What was it, something I did?
Exactly. You know, and you know, when you're doing that for 50 odd years of your life, it's an emotional burden, isn't it? That, you know, that comes with it. And it's just your normal, isn't it? It's your normal to respond by feeling guilty or feeling the shame or feeling that you haven't done it right, and then putting more pressure on yourself. You know, it's a tricky cycle, isn't it, to try and break. when you have, when you're neurodivergent, and
Absolutely.
yeah,
While you were talking there, I was recalling things that used to happen at school,
Yeah.
and the whole class would get told off for something.
yes, yeah,
And it might be, I don't know, that they left something out that they weren't supposed
you're staying in at playtime.
Yeah, all of that kind of thing. And I remember it vividly as a child.
Yeah.
My go-to was, oh God, what did I do?
Yeah.
Did I do that?
Yeah.
I don't remember doing that, but maybe I did do that.
It was 29 other
It
children.
was 29 other children, and even though in the back of my mind I knew that I hadn't,
Yeah.
I would still feel that
Yeah.
guilt
Oh, sure.
because of the whole class situation.
Yeah.
And it was almost that kind of,
Yeah.
the instant sort of reaction. And I, at the time, I don't think I realised that was guilt. And I think
No, sure.
it felt like anxiety, or
Yeah.
not being sure about what was going on,
Yeah.
because I didn't quite get the situation.
Definitely, it's that kind of weird, uncomfortable feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
How should I feel about what's happening right now? I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
So, like you said, your default is, oh, God, it must be me. I must have done it wrong.
Exactly. And I think a lot of individuals, not just neurodivergent individuals, experience alexithymia, where they find it quite difficult to name the emotion.
Yeah.
They just know that they feel off, but they don't quite know what it was. And I think that's what I was maybe experiencing then, and perhaps with a sort of a little more maturity, understanding, the training that I've had as a therapist. I now look back and I think, I think perhaps that was me. It was a combination of feeling guilt and feeling anxious because the whole class had been, and I still don't like being singled out. It's like, oh my God, there's a spotlight on me. And I think that's partly one of the reasons why I really don't like presentations, because you've got all those eyes.
All of that. Yeah.
For someone that struggles with direct eye contact, having 300 people looking at you.
But you do it, and you do it amazingly.
Yeah.
And I think, you just reminded me, the amount of presentations and things that I've done over the years, going to hundreds of people. I suppose that's just when we put on our amazing masks, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And don't feel then that we're going to get it wrong, because it's almost kind of not us, is it? It's this other person that's standing there, giving the presentation.
And it does come back to the guilt when I say no to things. I do find one-to-many presentations really uncomfortable, and the guilt I'll feel at saying no.
Oh yeah, that's horrible, isn't it? The word no is so loaded, isn't it? Particularly if you've got ADHD, it's because you don't want to say no to people, do you? And you're willing to become exhausted to avoid that, isn't it? To avoid that other person or those people. Oh, she said no to me, whereas actually they'd probably be quite impressed, wouldn't they, that we said it for once?
Exactly. And it is the guilt that I experience afterwards about, not being able to, finding it so dysregulating. I think is probably the best way of saying it, to do that. And I've done webinars to lots and lots of people, but it's that standing up in front of a room full of people all looking at me. And being very exposed, that I find quite difficult. And I know that's not an experience that's exclusive to me as an ADHD autistic individual. It's that.
You add on wanting to get it completely right and being perfect, but nobody in the audience is expecting you to be.
Yeah,
Get
absolutely.
it right every second of that presentation. While you've been talking, I've also been thinking about my foster children again, and the world of where they've been brought up, in abusive homes. Some of them until they're 10, 12, 13 or whatever, they've got a life of it, where they can feel so guilty for the abuse that's going on in that home. For example, if one parent is being unkind to the other, and the guilt that they often carry that they can't make it better for their siblings or for their mum or their dad, whoever's, or whatever they're witnessing in their home, is something that they all carry for a lifetime, and that shame. And when you're telling your foster child, for goodness sake, I told you 100 times, pick up the stuff off your floor. Even just that, that can trigger that guilt that then leads to the feeling of shame. And it's tricky. It's really hard to parent therapeutically when it's just kind of that everyday stuff. For goodness sake, please put your plate in the dishwasher. I've told you 100 times. When that's just kind of normal day-to-day stuff you'd say as a parent. But I have to think about it all the time about how loaded is that question I'm asking? Is it going to make that child or that young person potentially feel that way and feel bad about themselves? And how can we do it in a fun way? Timing themselves, or if let's see how much you can get done today, and then tomorrow we can go to the park instead of tidying your room. It's always kind of you having to have those tricks up your sleeve ready so that you can say things as therapeutically and as positively as possible, and that's hard when you're neurodivergent yourself, and sometimes you're just feeling absolutely knackered.
Yeah. It's worth acknowledging that we don't get it right all the time.
No.
And I think that's hard because I think sometimes we don't talk about the fact that parenting is an imperfect thing.
Yeah.
And there will be moments where you will feel guilty because it didn't go just as you wanted it to.
Yes.
And that's okay as long as it's coming from a good place and a place of love, and you're not being unkind.
Yeah.
It's hard because when a child has grown up in that kind of environment, they are perhaps taught that they're responsible for other people's emotions.
So much, yeah.
And I think that's part of where that guilt comes from.
Yeah.
We're taking on responsibilities as children, and in some cases that leads into adulthood. It's about co-regulation and working with our children.
Yeah, definitely.
And also, giving ourselves that compassion when we are dysregulated.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that too.
Yeah, completely. In fact, several of the foster teenagers that I have now, they all have, several younger siblings that they don't live with now. And so not only were they carrying the guilt of, parents, and they were always doing things wrong all the time, they were also caring for their younger siblings in that abusive home. And, they often talk to me now about that guilt that came with that they couldn't protect their little brothers and sisters. And how awful that, a 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old has now, is now in foster care, siblings separated and with other carers. And they've got, that guilt forever that, they couldn't stop, their little brother or their little sister not being fed. And when they tell me those stories, it's so raw and so real. And, trying to support them around that guilt and shame that they're feeling, it's, they quite clearly all need much more talk therapy to go through their life stories. And I hope that, with the right love and the right nurturing, that all of those children will feel less of that as they get older. So they're going to have enough of their own guilt and shame, aren't they?
It is heartbreaking hearing those stories, and it takes time.
Yeah.
And sometimes, it doesn't matter how many times we get told when we're a child and we're taking on that responsibility that we shouldn't have to take on. It's not our responsibility.
No, it's not.
10, 11-year-old to look after a 4, 5-year-old younger sibling,
very much so.
to protect them from what adults are doing. That is an understandable guilt because we love our younger siblings. It isn't a guilt that us as a society should be comfortable with hearing about. And it pales into insignificance, the guilt about saying no to a presentation. Slightly different league there,
but still
that doesn't minimize that guilt that you do experience. And it is the acknowledgement of that, and being compassionate to oneself that can start that healing journey. The realization and the experiences that hopefully those children will have within a nurturing environment
Yeah.
will help with the healing process. But it's a long, hard road.
Yeah. I remember my parents split up when I was 6 and my brother was 2. And we stayed living with my dad. And I remember that feeling of responsibility for my little brother, who was 2. And my dad had always been the one that was, working. My mum was at home with us. And I remember my dad, when my mum left, I remember my dad saying, "Can you tell me what your brother likes to eat?" And I remember putting a list up. I wrote in my 6-year-old handwriting all the things that I liked and didn't like, and all my brother liked and didn't like, to help my dad. And he changed all his work hours so that he could be with us and stuff. But I remember that kind of mixed feeling of responsibility and accountability and guilt if I wasn't doing what I felt at that age was the right to be looking after my brother with my dad, like changing his nappies and stuff. I can really vividly remember doing all of that. But feeling the guilt if I didn't feel like I was getting it right. And that was at the age of 6, And my dad certainly wasn't putting any pressure on me to be a carer. It can start so young, can't it? Those negative feelings. And then, what that does to kind of map you out as a young adult as well.
And it sounds like part of that is the wanting to please the parent as the child.
Yeah. And I suppose I just didn't know that at the time, did I? I was desperate to please my dad. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something that all children experience.
Yeah.
So I want to please my adult.
Absolutely. Even if that adult is the one that is giving them trauma and abuse, that's all we want to do, is make them happy, and you have that unconditional love for them, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm hearing from what you're saying that an understanding of where that comes from can be really, really helpful. And as I think back to my presentation thing, and I'm using this as an example because I feel that everybody might have experienced it. Once I realised that it's because everybody's looking at me and I don't like eye contact.
Yeah.
And then it's a sensory issue as well as a exposure anxiety issue.
Right.
That has helped with the guilt because I understand what's going on.
Sure.
And I become a little more accepting of it. And I think that maybe applies to all of those experiences of guilt and shame, that the journey of healing and being a bit more understanding is around actually just getting what's going on.
Yeah, sure. Having that awareness of, whether it is that you've got diagnosis of things or whether you've identified yourself as ADHD autistic, isn't it? So that you can educate yourself and read up about that, or, do relevant training so that you, like you said, so you understand and you're really fully aware why you're having those feelings. And I think that can help reduce, can't it, the feelings of guilt and the shame or the wanting to get things right, if you know that that's part of your makeup,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the acknowledgement that, sometimes you might feel comfortable to do it because the rewards might outstrip but also the acknowledgement that, oh my God, that isn't just a slightly discomfort. It really, and I'm just thinking about it, and it's like that actual realization that it isn't just no presentation kind of reaction. It's a much more all body response.
So on one of our other podcasts, weren't we were talking about self-compassion, and I think that self-compassion is really, really needed, isn't it, with those feelings of guilt? Because if you don't at least try a little bit to manage it by understanding it, but also by doing the actions of, being mindful or whatever it is to regulate yourself from those feelings of guilt and shame, then it's going to eat you up, isn't it? You have to work as a neurodivergent person at finding some regulation and some balance from those feelings of guilt and shame.
Yeah. And we talk about chronic shame within the therapeutic process a lot, when it does become so debilitating that feeling of I am wrong is the message that you're giving yourself constantly. And if that is the voice that you're constantly getting, You know, it's almost like a self-rejection. You're rejecting yourself. Takes a long time, and really understanding where those feelings are coming from.
Right.
Really understanding when those feelings occur as well, because it's really hard when you're a neurodivergent individual in particular, where the thoughts tumble.
Yeah.
You've had 50 thoughts within the space of 2 seconds.
Yep.
And if they're all negative about it, that can be so overwhelming.
Yeah.
It's about understanding where those are coming from, and even acknowledging and accepting that the reason for those thoughts is understand.
Sure. And I suppose that requires some level of willingness to kind of wade through that uncomfortable bit, doesn't it?
And that's hard, you know.
Yeah.
Therapy is often a really hard process.
Yes. Yeah.
And the work that we do as individuals within therapy, it can be really, really difficult.
Yeah, sure.
And, you know, you're only with the therapist for an hour usually in a week, and a lot of the work happens outside of that.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's that building that insight and awareness and different perspective sometimes, because it can be really hard to get caught within your perspective. And if you go back to your 6-year-old self that felt that it was your responsibility to look after your 2-year-old brother. And it's only maybe when we think that, is that a reasonable expectation from a 6-year-old? And we might not even have thought of that until we start working through those experiences of guilt and shame.
Say to people, you know, if you don't work through that, if you don't deal with that, you know, it's going to come back and bite you on the bum. I really, really do believe that it's important to deal, you know, with what that trauma is, or what those negative feelings are, you know.
And I think some of these more complex emotions like shame, but it might be caused by shame.
Yeah, of course.
Because you might be lashing out because of the shame that you experience. Because you feel, you know, you're wrong, or the guilt you experience because you feel you've done something wrong.
Yeah, it's almost just too much to cope with, isn't it? Sometimes that feeling, that overwhelm.
And it's unpicking that.
Since you're 7, I've probably said to her for the last 30 odd years that I think she would benefit from, you know, counselling, or, you know, some kind of talk therapy. And she has always kind of absolutely, you know, poo-pooed it, you know, said absolutely not doing that. And we're estranged at the moment, and I'm hoping that she is doing some counselling. She said she would think about it. But, you know, I've seen her, you know, with a lifetime of guilt for an island, she's got so much trauma there. She grew up in Belfast in the Troubles, and I know she felt terrible about leaving, you know, her family and all of that was going on, and has literally just never dealt with all of these things. And, you know, now a woman who's nearly 80, has almost kind of destroyed herself and her emotions and her confidence and her self-esteem. And I just hope, you know, that she has taken that journey to have some therapy and some time to unpick all of that, so that she can, you know, be more at peace with herself and her mind, you know, in her later stages of life. But it's been hard to see somebody do that to themselves, but not have the confidence, the courage, whatever it might be, to go and sit in that room and talk to that therapist, you know, despite, you know, having love around her and support, once you've got that awareness about yourself.
So thank you so much for sharing that, and for sharing all today. I hope that everybody has enjoyed listening to us today, and we'll be back again next Tuesday. And do check out some of our other podcast episodes, from supporting yourself around self-compassion to understanding masking and rejection-sensitive dysphoria. We'll be back again next week. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Helen.